A 21-year-old student crashes her car on a dark country road, then vanishes before police arrive. But the crash is not the beginning of the story, because the 48 hours before she disappeared make absolutely no sense. This is the disappearance of Maura Murray. On February 9th, 2004, Maura Murray quietly packed up her dorm room, told her professor she'd be gone for a week due to a death in the family, and drove north out of Massachusetts. There was no death in family. Hours later, her car was discovered crashed on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. When police arrived, Maura was gone, leaving behind one of the most debated mysteries of the last 20 years. But before the crash, before the drive, Maura's life was already slipping into something she couldn't control. Maura was born on May 4, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. She grew up in a close but complicated family, the fourth of 5 children. She was raised mainly by her mother after her parents divorced when she was 6 years old. She was a top student, a standout track athlete, disciplined enough to get into West Point, one of the most competitive military academies in the country. At West Point, she studied chemical engineering and ran track. She met her boyfriend Billy Roche there in fall 2001. They stayed together even after everything changed, because in July 2001, Maura was caught stealing makeup from commissary at Fort Knox during a training trip. Small items, low value, but at West Point, honor violations are taken extremely seriously. A honor investigative hearing was convened. The evidence was strong enough to recommend her removal from the cadet corps, but before the superintendent could make the final decision, Maura withdrew on January 2nd, 2002. She transferred to UMass Amherst to study nursing, a fresh start. People who knew her described 2 versions of Maura: the highly achieving, composed young woman who excelled under pressure, and the quiet side that hid her stress, her struggles with self-image, and her private battles. At UMass, she worked 2 jobs, maintained strong grades, and stayed with Billy despite the long distance. But under the surface, things were beginning to crack. And what happened in the days before she disappeared suggests she was facing something far heavier than anyone realized. November 2003, 3 months before her disappearance, Maura was arrested for credit card fraud. She had been copying credit card numbers from receipts she found and using them to order food from local restaurants. The charges were minor, under $250, but it was another violation, another mistake. The charge was set to be dismissed after 3 months of good behavior. By February 2004, she was nearly in the clear, but the pattern was there: pressure building, mistakes accumulating, and a young woman who seemed to be searching for a way out. On Thursday, February 5th, Maura was working the late shift at her campus security job at an art gallery. Around 10:30 p.m., her supervisor found her completely distraught. She was frozen, crying, unable to speak. When she finally said anything, it was only, "My sister." She'd been on the phone with her older sister, Caitlin, who was struggling with alcohol addiction and relationship problems. Caitlin later said the conversation wasn't dramatic, just an update about her struggles. But something about that call broke Maura. Her supervisor had to escort her back to her dorm around 1:20 a.m. This incident is one of the biggest red flags in the entire case. What triggered such an extreme reaction? The next night, Saturday, February 7th, Maura's father, Fred, drove up from Connecticut. They went car shopping together. Her Saturn was failing and she needed something reliable. They test drove a few vehicles but didn't buy anything. They would try again the following weekend. Fred then treated Maura and a friend to a dinner, and they stopped at a liquor store. That evening, Maura borrowed her father's brand new Toyota Corolla to attend a dorm party. In the early hours of Sunday morning, around 3 a.m., she crashed the car into a guardrail in South Hadley. Damage was significant, around $8,000. Police responded, but no DUI, no charges. Fred later said he wasn't angry. He was more worried than anything else. The insurance would cover it. He told Maura to pick up the accident report forms from the DMV and he would take care of the rest. But it was the second emotional event in less than 48 hours. Her friends noticed Maura seemed embarrassed, stressed, and distant. At 5:30 a.m. Sunday morning, shortly after the accident, Maura called Billy from her father's cell phone. He consoled her, though he later said he felt there was more on her mind than just the crash. On Sunday night, around 4 a.m., Maura was on her computer. She searched MapQuest for directions to multiple locations: the Berkshires in West Massachusetts, Burlington, Vermont, and the White Mountains in New Hampshire. All were places she had visited before, places she knew, places she liked. But the most troubling search? She looked up information about the effects of alcohol on an unborn fetus. This sparked immediate speculations. Was Maura pregnant? Was that the pressure she was under? No one knows for certain. Some say it could have been for a nursing school assignment. Others point to it as evidence of a hidden crisis. Then she started packing her dorm room into boxes, not just an overnight bag. The whole room, her belongings, posters, toiletries, all boxed. She left an email printout on top of one of the boxes. Correspondence between her and Billy that suggested relationship troubles. This is something almost nobody does for a 1-week break, and it suggested a mindset very different from "I'll be back next week." Monday, February 9th, 2004. Classes were cancelled due to a snowstorm, but Maura was already planning to leave. At 1 p.m., she emailed her professors and work supervisor saying she would be away for a week because of death in the family. Her family later confirmed there was no death. This lie marks the moment Maura formally stepped away from her normal life. Around the same time, she called a fellow nursing student, possibly to return borrowed scrubs. She also sent Billy an email. "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I don't feel like talking too much of anyone. I promise to call today though. Love you, Maura." But she never called. At 3:15 p.m., she withdrew $280 from an ATM. The footage shows her calm, composed, expressionless. She withdrew nearly everything in her account, leaving just $16 behind. Minutes later, she went to a liquor store and purchased alcohol: a box of Franzia wine, Kahlua, Baileys, vodka, and other small bottles, about $40 worth, enough for several drinks. She was alone, no one with her. At some point that afternoon, she picked up the accident report forms her father had requested, the paperwork for Saturday night's crash. At 4:37 p.m., she checked her voicemail. It was her final confirmed use of her cell phone. She didn't call her father, she didn't call Billy, she didn't call friends, just voicemail. And then, silence. Maura began driving north, toward the White Mountains. The Saturn she drove was in rough condition. It had severe damage from previous accidents, needed a rag stuffed in the tailpipe to reduce visible smoke, and was not fully reliable. She passed through Woodsville, New Hampshire, around 7 p.m. No one knows her exact destination. At 7:27 p.m., everything stops. Residents along Route 112 reported hearing a thump. A neighbor, Faith Westman, looked outside and saw a black Saturn lodged in a snowbank, facing the wrong direction. She called 911 at 7:27 p.m. Minutes later, a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood was driving home when he nearly collided with her car. He stopped and spoke to the driver briefly. He asked if she needed help. She declined, saying she had already called AAA. She hadn't. There is no signal there, even today. Butch went home and called police at 7:43 p.m. He later said the woman seemed shaken, but not injured, somewhat disoriented, but coherent. Faith Westman made a statement during the 9/11 call that remained redacted for over 10 years. She said she saw a man in the car, smoking a cigarette, although later she changed her statement, saying the red light she saw could have been from a cell phone instead. When Sergeant Cecil Smith arrived at 7:46 p.m., Maura was gone. Only 15 minutes had passed since the first 911 call. Inside the car, airbags deployed, cracked windshield, box of Franzia wine in the back, some liquid spilled, an empty Coke bottle that smelled like alcohol, her belongings neatly placed, AAA card, gloves, CDs, makeup, diamond jewelry, driving directions to Burlington, her favorite stuffed animal, a book called Not Without Peril, about mountain climbing accidents in the White Mountains. The car was locked. Outside the car, a rag was stuffed into the tailpipe, something her father explained was likely part of an attempt to reduce the smoke for the moment from the failing Saturn engine. Missing from the scene, her cell phone, her credit cards, her debit card, her backpack, the Baileys, Kahula, and vodka she purchased earlier. None of these items have ever been located or used since her disappearance. From the crash site, search dogs tracked her scent along the road eastbound for about 100 meters, and then it stopped suddenly, like she got into another vehicle. The search didn't begin immediately. It took several hours before Maura was officially considered missing. Her family insists these delays cost crucial time. Police initially thought she may have wandered off, perhaps intoxicated. Some even speculated she ran away intentionally. Billy Roche was flying from Oklahoma to New Hampshire the morning on February 11th to join the search. Before boarding, he turned off his phone. When he landed and checked his voicemail, there was a message. He described it as whimpering, soft crying, labored breathing, like someone who was really cold. He believed it was Maura. The call was traced to a prepaid calling card. Police determined it came from the American Red Cross, whose Billy's mother had contacted to request emergency leave for him. But Billy and his family weren't convinced. The message was brief, haunting. Was it Maura calling for help? Or was it truly just Red Cross worker who hung up after reaching voicemail? To this day, it remains a point of debate. Once search started, they were massive. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras, hundreds of volunteers, cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar at locations of interest. Not one confirmed piece of evidence belonging to Maura was ever found in the surrounding woods. And this is a key point. If Maura had died from exposure nearby, something would have been found. A shoe, a piece of clothing, her backpack, but there was nothing. One of the theories is that she ran away intentionally, possible but increasingly unlikely. Her bank account was untouched after February 9th. No passport activity, no sighting ever confirmed. Her cell phone never used again. Some point to her dorm being packed up as evidence she planned to disappear. But if she truly wanted to vanish permanently, why take the textbooks? Why leave so many belongings behind? Author James Renee has theorized she may have been pregnant and fled to start over. Possibly fearing her pending credit card case would prevent her from becoming a nurse. But Fred Murray and the family strongly dispute this theory. Another theory is that she died in the woods. Extensive searches make this unlikely, though not impossible. But after 20 years, not a single confirmed item has been found. The terrain was searched throughoutly. Cadaver dogs found nothing. In 2021, human remains were discovered about 25 miles from the crash site. For a moment, investigators thought the case might finally be solved. But in November 2021, the remains were confirmed not to be Maura's. Other people believe she was picked up by someone. This is the most widely believed explanation. Her scent ending suddenly after 100 meters supports it. The 15-minute window between witnesses and police arrival makes it plausible. There has never been a suspect, never a confession, never a confirmed lead. Was it a stranger? Someone she knew? An opportunistic predator? No one knows. Another theory is the nearby property suspicion. In 2017, cadaver dogs alerted on a property a few hundred feet from the crash site. Ground-penetrating radar detected disturbances in the basement. The homeowners consented to a search. The basement floor was excavated. They found nothing except a small piece of poetry and old piping. Fred Murray was devastated. He had been certain this was finally the answer. Police never found evidence linking the property to Maura's disappearance, but questions remain. Maura Murray left behind a trail of contradictions, emotional breakdowns, unexplained travel plans, 2 car accidents in 3 days, online searches that hinted at hidden struggles, and disappearance timed almost perfectly between witnesses and police. 20 years later, her family still searches for answers. New Hampshire State Police still consider it an active investigation. In February 2024, on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, authorities released an age progression photo showing what Maura might look like today at 41 years old. And the truth is, there might not be one explanation. Maura's story is a maze with multiple entrances and no exit.